just make our way to a comfortable seated position, and you can sit however you like. So just see if you can feel where the sitting bones are. These are semicircles of bone that we sit on. And we just want to try and feel like we're sitting up in the middle of those sitting bones. And from there, the spine is just going to reach up nice and tall. So you might sit with your legs out straight or nearly straight. You might have a leg bent. You might kneel, or you might sit with that ankles crossed. So the position of the legs is not important at all right now. We just want to feel like we're sitting up nice and tall. So just be comfortable. If you have a block or a cushion, you might bring that under the sitting bones. So if you don't find sitting cross-legged very comfortable, you might find that you're able to do it if you just raise the hips up a little bit. So you could sit on a cushion perhaps. So just take a moment to decide. And then we're just going to try and find some stillness. So you can rest the hands however you like. So again, that might depend on how you're sitting. You might have one hand on top of the other in the lap. You might rest them on the legs. And then you can close the eyes if you want to, or just have a soft gaze on the ground in front of you. And we're just going to see if we can notice what the breath's doing. So we're not going to change that breath at all, literally just noticing what we have. So let's just see if we can stay focused on the next 10 breaths. So we're just counting 10 breaths in and out. And in these periods of stillness, it's quite good to notice just what's going on in the mind. Is it presenting you with 100 worries or thoughts or things to go on your to-do list? Or do you find it a little easier just to stay focused on the breath? And don't worry if you find it really hard. Most people find that really, really difficult to start with. And this ability to stay focused, to keep your attention where you put it, is actually something that not very many people can do at all. So don't be despondent with that, but just notice how often the mind wanders. If you suddenly are halfway down a train of thought, you can just notice that and bring it back to the breathing. And one of the things that makes yoga so relaxing is that we're constantly noticing what's going on in the body. So we might notice a stretch, we might notice that we feel we need to build some strength in the wrists or the shoulders or whatever it is. And all of those are sensations that we can rest our attention on, just like we were resting our attention on the breathing a moment ago. So when we move through our yoga practice today, I just invite you to notice what's going on for you in your body with each posture. Now, there will undoubtedly be some postures that are no good for you because of an injury or maybe just the way you're made. So any postures that give you pain, sharp pains at the joints, or just feel wrong, then that's absolutely fine. You just need to back out of that posture a little bit. So you might be able to find a smaller version, or you might just come out altogether. That's completely fine. So we're going to move through a few beginner postures today, and we'll hold them for about 6 or 7 breaths just to give you plenty of time to find your way into those postures and see how they feel. And then over time with these lockdown yoga videos, we'll progress a little bit more and we'll bring more strength postures in, more challenge to our practice. We'll learn the sun salutations, which is a cardiovascular workout, and we'll really begin to make some progress. But the real thing that is important in all of that, whether you're practicing beginner postures or practicing more advanced postures, is that we're trying to keep the attention on what we're feeling in our body and keep ourselves hooked in the present moment. So we're not going to allow our minds to carry us away into thoughts of worry or memories or plans or whatever it is. So we're using this time to stay focused in the present, and that's why yoga is very relaxing. All right, good stuff. So the first posture we'll come to is a standing forward bend. So just make your way to a standing position. And the standing forward bend is a stretch in the hamstrings. Now your hamstrings attach from the hips down to just below the back of the knee there. So when you come into a standing forward bend, you might notice a stretch anywhere along that point. So that again is something to rest your awareness on. A standing forward bend happens because we are tilting the pelvis over, and how much of a tilt you have at that pelvis is determined by how long, how flexible these hamstrings are. So go right ahead and see if you can start to tilt the pelvis forward. So we're not rounding the back to come down, we're just tilting the pelvis over until you feel that stretch in the hamstrings. So there's no need to go any further. So you might have your block here to climb the hands up onto. You might be resting the hands against the legs. Or if you've been practicing yoga a little while, or you just have flexible hamstrings anyway, you might be able to hold on around the ankles or the big toes. So wherever you come to, just see if you can determine whether this is a nice feeling stretch or whether you've pushed yourself too hard. And if you have pushed yourself too hard, maybe ask yourself why. Maybe we have a habit of pushing ourselves too hard in our lives, but that actually isn't going to serve us in yoga, because if you push the muscles too hard, your body will fight back and your body will win. So you just need to find a place where the stretch feels lovely, and then let your attention focus on that lovely feeling of stretch and on the breathing. And then we can just begin to roll ourselves up to standing and just ask ourselves how that felt. So this standing position that we're in now is in fact a yoga pose as well. So let's just bring those feet to hip width and just have a sense that we're standing nice and tall. And you could close your eyes while you do this and just really notice that sensation of balance. So you might be able to notice that the weight is distributed perhaps evenly along the length of the foot, or maybe it's in the heels a little bit, maybe it's in the toes a little bit. You might see some little tiny wobbling movements as your brain constantly tries to correct and bring you back to the middle place. See if you can let those shoulders fall down away from the ears. So there's lots of space here. See if you can have a sense of lifting the rib cage up away from the hips. So that waist is nice and long. And you might begin to draw the belly button in towards the spine. Let's have 5 more breaths here. Okay, good stuff. So from here, let's make our way into chair pose. So chair pose is going to work the muscles of the thighs here at the front. So let's just step the feet so they're a little closer together. You can have the big toes touching and a little gap in between the heels. And then we're just going to bring these arms up as we bend the knees like we're sitting down into a chair. So we want to keep the neck and the spine all in one line. We can start to tuck the tailbone underneath so we're not curving the lower back out. We can press those knees together. Now the lower you sit, the harder you work through those legs. So just go ahead and explore this and just see how it feels. You might pull the tummy in as well. And let's have 5 more breaths here. Good, and then let's just gently come back to a standing position. Step the feet out again to hip width and find your mountain pose. So if you got a little bit out of breath, working hard in that last posture, that's fine. Just notice that breathing. Maybe it begins to slow down. Okay, good stuff. So in yoga, there are quite a lot of postures that ask for an external rotation of the hip in its socket. So as I'm sure you're aware, the femur, the thigh bone comes up and it connects into the hip here, and that's a ball and socket joint. So theoretically, we should have really a lot of movement there. But we often find that we have some limitations, but there's also an element of how we're made, as well as kind of tightness of muscles and ligaments. So let's just see where we're at. So we'll just bring the weight onto the right foot and we'll just start to turn that left knee out to the side and just picturing what's going on there in that ball and socket joint. So just see how well balanced you feel. If you're beginning, you'll likely want to keep that big toe just lightly in contact with the floor. But if you feel all right, you might begin to lift that foot to the calf muscle and bring the hands together at the center of the chest. Now, if you lift the elbows to the height of the shoulders and push, you can start to do a little bit of work through those arms and shoulders as well. Let's have 5 more breaths here. And then just stepping down. So trying that on the left foot now, we'll just turn the right knee out to the side. And you might decide to lift that foot up. Okay, good stuff. So let's just step out of that and we can shake anything that needs a little shake. Okay, so we're just going to have a go at coming down into a squat, and again this might be something that you find easy or very hard indeed, and that just depends on what's going on with the hips, the knees and the ankles. But first of all, we're just going to take a step out wide, and then we're going to have a go at bending the knees. We can bring the hands together and we're going to see whether we can come all the way down into a squat, but be sitting up tall and straight through the back. Now when you begin, it might be that you kind of leaning forwards and all of the muscles and joints are kind of screaming. So you just take a judgment call on whether they're screaming just because the muscles are working hard or whether it's actually not the right posture for you. As we get a little bit better at this, we can start to bring the feet so they point forwards rather than out to the side and are a little closer together. Now it might not feel like it at the moment, but this is actually a really good way to sit. It's really healthy for the back because there is zero pressure on the lower back because it's just kind of hovering in the air. We are not sitting on our bottoms. So wherever you are, just see if you can do 5 more breaths here. If you can't, no worries, just sit down whenever you're ready. Okay, well done. So we can just sit down, our bottoms on the floor, and just come to a seated position with a tall spine. So we're just going to have a look at a downward facing dog now. So you may well be familiar with this posture, you may well have seen it many times. It's a brilliant posture. It lengthens the hamstrings, but it also begins to build some strength in the upper body. So it's just a very lovely posture, and we do it a lot in yoga. There's quite a few elements of it that need some care, so I'm just going to talk you through what we need to do. So we can start in a tabletop pose with the hands underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips, and we're just trying to lengthen out that spine. And whenever we think about a long spine, we want to remember that the neck is also the spine. Sounds like an obvious thing to say, but quite often we end up kind of flinging the head back or dropping it down, but we want to try and have a continuous line there. So we've got the tummy pulling in, and that's helpful because these muscles support the lower back from underneath. And if you have unexplained back pain that just suddenly comes, it may well be that these muscles have just gotten weaker over time, and they've got to a point where they can't support your back anymore. So we want to curl the toes underneath us and press the hands firmly into the mat. Now those fingers need to be spread out wide with the middle fingers pointing forwards. Then we're going to push those hands into the mat and start to send the hips up and back. So keep moving everything back, and the chest is sort of going to fall down in between the shoulders. Now if the hamstrings are a little tight here, you can have some release by bending the knees, and you might find a bit more length in the back doing that. So we're really trying to have a long, straight back. If the hamstrings are okay, you can work on stretching those heels right down to the ground. So make sure these shoulders are not above the wrists. We're not in this position. The shoulders are really a very long way back behind the line of the wrists. Ears should be in line with the biceps. And let's have 5 more breaths here. So depending how much upper body strength you have, those arms and shoulders might be starting to wobble or complain right now. And if that's the case, this is just a great posture to notice your strength building, because after a while you'll notice that you can hold a downward facing dog for 5 or 10 breaths without any wobbling of the muscles of the arms and the shoulders. But for now, let's just come back to that tabletop pose with the knees on the floor and the tummy pulling in. So we'll just do a couple of massaging kind of movements for the spine, and these are called cat and cow. So as you breathe out, we're just going to arch that back upwards, and you can push the hands into the floor and see whether you can spread the shoulder blades, feeling a stretch in between them. And then with the inhale, you can bend back the other way. This is called cow pose. So we don't want to push past any areas of pain or discomfort. So if the back does hurt a little bit, you may be well advised just to stop before that point. And we can move between these postures with the breath, exhaling to cat pose and inhaling to cow pose. Let's have one more exhale and inhale. Good, and then we can come back to our tabletop pose with a nice long straight spine. And then we can do some lateral flexion or sideways bending of the spine. So let's just begin to turn so the left shoulder and the left hip get a little bit closer to one another, and we feel a stretch along the right side of the body. And then we can turn and have the right shoulder and the right hip coming closer together, and a stretch along the left side of the body. So if your spine was viewed from above, it would be curving into a C shape and a reverse C shape. And then we'll come back to our tabletop pose. Now, if your wrists are feeling a little bit tired, it can be quite a nice thing to do to just put the back of one hand on the floor and wiggle the elbow a little bit. So the wrist is bending the other way now. You might find a little bit of a stretch there. And same with the other hand. And you can do that at any time the wrists are feeling like they're a bit fed up of being flexed that way. So now we'll come to a resting pose, child's pose. Although for some people there's some work going on here, depending whether you can yet sit your heels and your bottom next to one another. So we're sending the bottom back and just seeing whether it comes to the heels or not. It doesn't matter, but it's just something to notice. And then we can let the forehead come towards the ground. If it doesn't touch the ground, you can fold the arms, or you can use a block or a cushion for a pillow. So in this one, you can have the knees apart, or you can have them together. So just see which one works for your body. You're also welcome to have the arms out in front of you or back beside the feet. And when you breathe, you might notice that the breath comes into the back body. And again, we're just looking for the sensations that we can feel in the body at this exact moment. Okay, so making your way to a seated position, we're just going to explore a little bit more of an external rotation at the hips. So we did a little bit of this in our standing tree pose, but we have a little bit more scope to do this when we're sitting down because we don't have to worry about the balance. So let's just have our left leg coming out straight, and we're going to have the right foot just touching against the inside of that leg, and we're letting that knee fall out to the side. Now, depending how high up it is, you might want to get your block or a cushion and just support it at the point it gets to. Okay, so you might just let it fall out and then just slide the block underneath. And then we're coming to the centers of those sitting bones and sitting up tall. Now, if your hamstrings are tight, this might actually be quite a lot of work. You might have a sensation that you're kind of rolling back, in which case you can put your hands beside you and just try and help yourself sit up tall. But if you have a little bit more capacity, you might be able to start to come forwards onto the front of the sitting bones. Again, we try not to round the back. Forward bends always happen because the pelvis is tilting forwards. And with the hands beside the leg there, we can just take a little bit of a forward lean. So that might bring you a stretch in the hamstring of this outstretched leg. I'll take 5 breaths from here. And again, we're just trying to notice all of the different things we feel. So let's just come back up so that we can swap sides. So the bent leg becomes the straight one. And we'll just draw that other foot in. Again, you might slide a block or a cushion underneath there, trying to find your way onto the centres of the sitting bones. So you're sitting up tall, and then we can just begin to walk these hands forwards a little way, or not, whatever's working for you. Remember the neck in line with the rest of the spine. And then we can make our way up. And we'll just bring those feet flat onto the mat and give the knees a little wiggle from side to side. And then we'll just do a little bit of abdominal work. So sitting up nice and tall, we just want those hands on the fronts of the shins here. And it's kind of like we're walking our rib cage up to the knees. And then holding this shape, we're just going to see about leaning back ever so slightly and see if you can feel the tummy muscles working. So if you can't, you just need to make that shape a little bit bigger, so you could extend the arms and lift the feet a little bit, but keep the chest looking up. So we'll take a little rest, sit the feet down, let the body fold forward. Let's do a second one. So keep the chest pointing up so the back is straight. Good. A little rest. And one last one. Brilliant work. Okay, so put those feet down, just round forwards for another rest. And then we're going to come to a back bend. So if you've got a block, grab it now. If not, maybe a few cushions. And we're just going to place the block or the cushions underneath the sacrum. Now that's the lowest part of the back, which is actually a fused kind of plate of bone here. So we're just going to lift the hips and slide the cushions or the block or the bolster or whatever you have underneath here. And we're just going to see how that feels in our body. If you want to extend the sensation of the back bend, you can straighten the legs. That will just cause the pelvis to tilt a little bit more and bring more curve into the back here. And then we're just going to have the sensation that the body is tumbling away from the block or the cushions, and we're just resting here. Let's have 5 more breaths. And then we'll just step those feet back in. If you did extend the legs, we can lift the hips and just slide the cushions or the block out from underneath us. And for a counter pose, we can just hug those knees in towards the chest, bring the chin up to the knees, so the back is rounded the other way. And then we'll let the head come down to the mat. And we'll just float those legs up in the air. Now they don't need to be straight if that's not comfortable, neither do they need to be vertical. So you could have something that looks like that, or you might be alright to have the feet completely straight up in the air. And you could experiment with reaching the arms overhead behind you. And again, noticing the sensations in the body. We're just going to rest here with those feet in the air. And then very gently, let's begin to bend the knees to lower the feet down to the ground. And then we're going to come into Shavasana, which is our final relaxation. So you might lie flat on the ground with the arms and legs a little bit away from the midline. You can tuck the shoulder blades underneath you so the shoulders snuggle down into the ground. If your lower back feels a little bit uncomfortable, just try stepping the feet flat onto the floor with the knees resting against one another, and tuck that lower back underneath you. And again, we just want to try and keep our awareness on the physical sensations of the breath and the body. If the mind invites us to catastrophize or worry, we just decline that offer. And coming back to this peaceful place, the present moment. you're ready, begin to wiggle the fingers and the toes, the wrists and the ankles, elbows and knees. Wiggle through the hips, along the length of the spine, through the shoulders, the head and the neck. And then in your own time, just bring yourself back to your seated position. Again, you can have your legs how you like. They could be straight or with crossed ankles or anything else. And with an inhale, we'll raise the hands up for one last stretch. And exhale, bring them down into the centre of the chest. And just taking a moment of gratitude. And then bowing forwards to close your practice.